Who knew that looking at so much yarn would be exhausting? Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today we're talking about a whip update, but also we're talking about Knit City Toronto, the fiber festival. But before we get into that, as for my mug and tea of the day, this is my Dog Mom mug, out of which I'm drinking my usual Sloan Classic Earl Grey. And as for my knits that I'm wearing today, this is my Lakes cardigan by Ozetta. This pattern accommodates busts measuring from 28 to 60 inches, allowing for the recommended positive ease. And I finished this last summer, since which I've worn this 28 times, which honestly I suspect it's probably more than that, but that's just the number of times that I have logged it. I kind of throw this on all the time, anytime that I'm cold, so it gets a lot of sort of unofficial, not like part of my wardrobe the way I might remember to write it down in a given day. But anyway, this was definitely one of my pricier projects at $345 Canadian. So divide that by 28 wears, and that puts us at a current cost per wear of $12.32 Canadian. And then I'm wearing that actually layered over another knit. This is my Sunny Top from Trust the Mojo, which unfortunately is not a size inclusive pattern. I knit this a long time ago in 2023, I believe, in the summer. Since then, it's not gotten a ton of wear. The fit isn't really what I wanted it to be. It kind of hits at a weird length, and it was bottom up, which, you know, I carry that with me as my grudge against bottom-up projects. But the good news on this one is that it only cost me $18 worth of yarn, and I've worn it 14 times so far, apparently, which seems honestly high to me, but it's been 3 years. I guess that's still not that often. And that puts our current cost per wear at $1.28. Also, in a little bit of channel housekeeping, I want to tell you that I have created a new sticker design that is now in the shop. Thanks, I knit it. I just felt like this was the thing that I would like to have as a sticker. I thought other people might like to have as a sticker. So this is now in my Etsy shop. The link is in the description and also on screen.
Editing Alley, forgot to mention that the one I'm holding up here, that was a test that's on white paper, but the actual version available in the shop is on holographic sticker paper.
But thanks, I knit it. This is the latest addition to the shop, which also has my I'd be wearing something I knit if it wasn't so hot out shirt, as well as the maker badge. So all of those are available now at the link in the description. All right, next on the agenda, we need to talk about Knit City Toronto. So this was my second year going. I went 2 years ago when it was in Toronto. Last year it was in Montreal. There was not a Toronto one. And this was my third fiber festival overall, because in the fall I went to Woolstock, which is a couple hours away from me. It was like Hamilton-ish. Wasn't in Hamilton. Where was it? Binbrook Fairgrounds, that's where it was. So Knit City is bigger, I think, than that one is, though I was actually surprised that, so this year Knit City moved venues. Last time I was in some hotel at the Harborfront. What was it? I'm gonna draw a blank on it now, but it was in like a convention center of a hotel. This year they moved it to the Enercare Center, which is this like big exhibition building area in the west end of the city. That it's where I go to the One of a Kind show in Toronto every year. Like, they host big stuff. So this was a big upgrade for it, though honestly it didn't really feel to me significantly bigger than Woolstock did. Very possible this is just my own poor estimations, but like it didn't really take that long to get through looking at everything. And just in terms of the number of people I felt like were around, it didn't feel that different. Don't trust my judging on these things. It was a different experience in that at Woolstock, it was kind of split into, I think, like 3 different barns. So you were kind of progressing through like, okay, we did a building. Okay, let's do the next building. Okay, let's do the next building. Whereas Woolstock, it's just all in this big giant room and you're just weaving your way down the aisles. But we're so off chronological order right now. Let's go through the sequence of the day. So I had made plans with Audrey of Fire and Fiber to go to Knit City together. So we met up early in the morning. I convinced her to line up with me for my favorite brunch place that I used to live really close to in the city. It's called Mildred's Temple Kitchen. So good, but it's like, if you were not there when they open, you're probably going to be on a wait list, and we do not have time for that. So I was like, Audrey, is there any chance you are willing to be standing outside of this restaurant before 9 a.m. with me, and then we can get in when they open at 9? And she, for some reason, agreed to that ridiculous ask, and I got to have my favorite thing that they make, which is their huevos Monty. It's sort of like a huevos ranchero situation. Could not have asked for a better way to start my Knit City day. This is also, I was so excited when they moved to the Enercare Center on the west end of the city, because it put me in proximity to Mildred's. Walkable from Mildred's. 10 out of 10 location. Cannot complain. So after we finished our breakfast, we walked over to Knit City. I think we got there probably around 10:30. Marketplace opened at 10, and it was definitely going when we got there. There was plenty of people. It was sort of a funny, like, it felt both crowded and not to me in different ways. So the space that they were in, one of the halls of the Enercare Center, there were so many other things going on that day. Like there's truly so much space in this building. So another hall had like an art festival going on. Another hall had a gamer convention of some kind. So there's like cosplay going on. There was just so many different kinds. There's like all the knitters in their sweaters, and then there's like the cosplayers milling around just in the hallway that like connects all the different hall in this context meaning giant room, but then the hallway connecting all the halls. I'm sorry they call them halls, but so it's just really funny to be in that hallway and be like, which of these events is this person going to? And you could usually tell based on what they were wearing. But so the crowd levels were sort of interesting because the booths were like, you know, predefined. I feel like booths are kind of like a standard size at these sort of things, right? And so there's all the booths lined up and you're filing through all the booths, and when you're filing through them, it kind of feels, okay, there's lots of people around. Some booths are busier than others, but there are definitely booths where you kind of have to wait for someone to get out of your way before you can go look at something. But then when you get to the end of a row, kind of the whole like back half of the room was pretty open. There were like some food trucks back there and some chairs, but there was a lot of extra space back there. And so I wish that, and again, I don't think this is how these events work, because I think that booths are kind of a standard size, but I'm like, I just wish that everyone's booth was like 50% bigger so you could just have more room to like walk around. So you'd have less of the like waiting for other people to get out of your way. I find it a little bit hard to like really consider options and really shop when I have to like wait my turn to even look at, because it's like, what if I want to look at something over here and then over there? And like, I really like to do a lot of, I want to touch it, and then I want to look at this, and then I want to compare them, and then I want to think about it and go back and look over there. And it's just hard to do that when you don't have the real like freedom of movement because of people being around. So fiber festivals for me are, I think, just never a fantastic shopping setup. I kind of think of them more as just like, it's like going to an art gallery. I'm just going to look at pretty yarn. If it transpires that there's something here that I fall in love with and that they have a quantity that I would need to make something I could think of that I would want to make, great. But I'm not going in like with that specific objective of like, I am shopping. That's kind of not how I think about it, because I think that to me would honestly just be like frustrating and overwhelming. So I was just there to look at nice stuff, to get sort of a dopamine hit of like, ooh, shiny yarn, ooh, more shiny yarn, ooh, so pretty, ooh, so colorful. That was really my only goal. I did go in prepared though, because like I said, I wanted to be prepared with the possibility that I would see something that I would really love and that I would want to buy there, because to me, one of the real potential benefits of doing actual shopping at a fiber festival is that you're often going to save quite a bit on shipping costs, especially if it's a brand based in the States and usually would be being subject to duties to get it here. Even if it's within Canada, buying from like a small dyer somewhere, you're still going to have to pay shipping costs if they don't have a storefront that you can go visit. So it can be an opportunity to get this unique yarn that's harder to get your hands on in a more cost-effective way, right? So I wanted to be prepared so that if I found something that I loved, I could act on it. I could buy the yarn without it being sort of a panic decision of like, well, how much do I get? What am I going to make with it? How much will I need to do that? And trying to figure this out on the fly, because I knew that I would really not enjoy doing that. So before I went, like the day before, I sat down with like my Ravelry favorites and I made a note in my phone that's sort of a table of like weights of yarn and then projects that I would make with each of those weights, and then what yardage I would need of that yarn in order to make that project in the size that I want to make. So that say I fell in love with a DK weight yarn, I would know immediately how much of it I needed to buy if I actually wanted to buy it. I also had kind of a contingency on some of the more common weights of yarn of like, okay, if it's a yarn with some variation to it and therefore something that I would probably want to be like an all over stockinette situation, I would make this. If it's a solid, here's something that's more like elaborate or textured or whatever that I would want to use that for. So I had my little like contingencies chart so that if I found something that I fell in love with, I would have the information that I needed on the spot to buy it and not have to be like, okay, let me go find somewhere to sit down and frantically flip through Ravelry. So I came prepared. And one thing that became really obvious to Audrey and I as we were walking around was we so made the right choice to come on a Sunday, because just in talking with different vendors and things, it sounds like Saturday was kind of wild. People kept talking about how busy it was, and it didn't feel unbusy on Sunday. Again, I often had to wait to look at something that I wanted to look at. So we were sort of like, okay, we definitely made the right decision in coming on the Sunday. And we also heard that the busyness kind of extended into food and drink availability. Like apparently the lines for coffee and food were over an hour long. People were getting very unimpressed. Apparently for day 2, they managed to actually find some more food trucks to bring in. So there were more options by the time we were there to kind of cut the lines a little. We did not have any need for that because we had just eaten a giant breakfast, but we did go stand in the coffee line, which I think maybe took us like 15, 20 minutes rather than we were hearing about like 90-minute waits. So I think there's always, especially when events are newer, especially when they change venues, like Knit City hasn't been around that long at all, I don't think. And this was its first year in this venue. So I think there's always a significant question mark of like, well, how busy is it going to be? How much do we actually need in terms of food trucks and things like that to serve that number of people without it ending up creating an issue? It sounded like we were close to a riot on Saturday. If anyone was there on Saturday, I would love to hear your experience of this. Was it as bad as I got the impression that it was? Is it being overstated in the telling of tall tales of the experience? Please let me know. But feeling really good about going on the Sunday. Also because it was very inexpensive. So I bought the early bird ticket, so just like in advance enough that it was still early bird pricing. And the Sunday only market ticket was $10. That seems pretty good. It was definitely worth it to me to... What? It's okay. Okay, nice, buddy. And then one of the other fun parts, obviously, about a fiber festival is the people that you get to see. So if you are someone who came up to me to say hi there, thank you for saying hi. It's really surreal to me when people like know who I am. Like, what are you talking about? So that's just fun. So thank you for saying hi. I got to meet a few viewers, so that was really cool. I was also that day wearing my Colette pullover, also a Sari Nordlund pattern, but knit out of Wandering Flock yarn, and Wandering Flock was at Knit City, Toronto. So I was kind of like, I mean, I need to take this sweater to go visit its mothership, right? And sort of the genesis of that project, because it's knit out of their cotton lino as well as their mohair. And at Knit City in 2024, they had just premiered their cotton lino line, and that was where I saw it in the citrine color for the first time. I did not buy it that day. I did buy from their booth, actually. I bought the mohair to do my... is it called? To do my cloud bow, but I didn't buy the cotton lino that day, but it sort of lived in my head specifically for the color. And then I kept seeing it come up on their social media, and eventually I was like, yeah, I'm gonna need to knit something out of that. So the previous Knit City was sort of the genesis of the idea at the very, very beginning of the seed for this sweater. So this year, the sweater got to go visit its mothership. And as soon as I walked in the booth, Geraldine recognized the sweater, recognized me, and I was like another like, you know who I am? You're Geraldine of the Wandering Flock. I got a picture with her. She's super sweet. I look like a giant in this photo. But it was just so fun to see her and be like, look at this sweater that I made with your yarn. It's so beautiful. The color is so perfect. And also they had one of the sample knits on the rack was the cloud bow that the other person working the booth was wearing at the last Knit City. That is what inspired me to knit the cloud bow. It all felt very full circle. And the Wandering Flock also at their booth, they had their brand new base, their fluff yarn that's like a blown style yarn, which I've never really felt that interested in as sort of a category of yarn generally. Like I think most that I've experienced, they just kind of feel very just sort of like plasticky to me. I tend to find that they don't really have the like charm of a wool yarn for me anymore, just whatever processing happens that gets them into this form. Oh my god, this version. I've never felt so tempted by a fluff yarn before. It just felt divine. Problem. The one contingency I was not prepared for on my list was a fluff yarn. Like the fluff quality of a yarn just kind of lends itself to a different kind of fabric, right? Because it's so light. The drape is just very different than a standard wool. I feel like you kind of need to pick a pattern that's well suited to that, or at least that you can sort of fathom what it would look like knit out of that, how it would be different, whether that's just from your own experience, of which I have none, or of being able to compare it to someone else's project. And I was like, I don't have the research to be able to figure this out, nor did it feel like something that I wanted to kind of go out on a limb and like improvise on, because I mean, of course it's a really nice yarn, so it's not cheap. I think it was $36 a skein, and I would need quite a few of them to knit a garment. And not knowing what garment that would be, I didn't want to just buy 10 skeins of this without a plan, because like, what if I decide I wanted to be a different color or whatever it is I decide I want to make, or what like there's any number of things that could change between this moment and like me knowing exactly what I want to make out of it. So I kind of decided like, wow, this would be a super convenient way to pick this up, and it would just be fun to like get this at the show, and for that to be what I like come home from the show with. That's my like, wow, look what I got at the show. That's so exciting. That's so fun. I just concluded that I'm better off just, again, letting the seed be planted, much like last time, and I can circle back to this later. And this also, it's not like this is one that will be particularly hard for me to source, because the Knitting Loft in Toronto does carry the Wandering Flock, including the fluff base. So I can get it another time. Geraldine planted that little seed in my head yet again. And I would like to knit something with this in the future. And kind of the other thing that had me not, running to my phone, Ravelry, what can I make out of a fluff yarn, making a plan, is that like I have yarn for my next project. Like I was not at this thing thinking I need to shop for my next project. It's like, I'm set. I have what I need. I don't love having a stash. Like if I found the perfect thing that I knew what I wanted to make out of it, that wouldn't have stopped me from buying it. But I don't like to acquire a stash like for fun. It actually kind of stresses me out to have too many projects ahead of yarn, because I think in a very project specific way. So I wasn't like trying to buy yarn. It wasn't like, okay, I need to sit down and figure out what I want to make with this so that I can buy it today. So another day, probably, I will at some point inevitably end up buying the Wandering Flock fluff yarn. I was just like so stunned by what it felt like. Like if it is at a store somewhere close to you that you can go touch it, I highly recommend. Of course, half the fun of a fire festival is just like squishing things. Absolute 10 out of 10. That was my favorite thing I squished in Knit City. And despite the fact that I didn't have like a next project that I needed to be shopping for, the one thing that I was really keeping my eye out for was, as mentioned in a previous video, I really love the Ampersand Fibers colorway Oriole. It's such a specific in-between of like a bright red and a brick red, and I find so few shades land in this place where it's not like a primary color, but it's also not a neutral. Like most that are sort of as subdued as this are more subdued, and they're more of like a terracotta, more of like an earth tone. So I just love the exact place that this one hits in the tonal range, and I was really hoping that I would find something at Knit City that would be sort of a color dupe for that. And this really just confirmed for me how unique of a color this is, because I found nothing. Like the closest one that I found was a superwash base, which also, that's kind of a tricky part for me of shopping indie dyed yarn, because so much of it's superwash and that's just not my thing. But the closest one I found was superwash, and even it wasn't quite it. It was just the closest I could find, but I still didn't love it quite as much. So, I mean, if anything, this is really validating that that yarn is special, and maybe someday I will be convinced to spend what it will cost to get me that, because it is in the States and it is expensive to begin with. So by the time you add duty, etc. I have actually had a handful of very kind people who are like, I live on Bainbridge Island, can I pick this up for you and get it to you in a way that will reduce those costs to you, which is so sweet. So if you're one of those people, thank you so much. I'm still like trying to convince myself and trying to search for an alternate. I'm trying to not be getting super attached to far-flung types of yarn that are difficult for me to acquire when like yarn is like, there's so much yarn from so many places. Do I really need to be paying a premium to get this one specific one? I mean, my thinking before the show was no. My thinking after the show and not finding anything in remotely close is a little more of a maybe. But I'm trying to at least delay that impulse, sit on it a while longer before I decide if that's what I'm doing. Because as much as this project costs nearly $350, I would love that to not be my average project cost. I would love for most of them to be significantly less than that. So we haven't bought the Ampersand Fibers yarn yet. Still haven't found a good alternate. I did get a few recommendations in the comments, but nothing I have seen is quite it for me. So the search continues. So in all, I think Audrey and I were in there maybe 2.5 hours browsing everything, and that includes like stopping, waiting in line to get a drink, chatting with people, all of the things. All right, it's time to check in on my current whip, which is my Book Club Cardigan. So let me dig this out. I have made both what feels like a lot of progress and also not a lot of progress on this since I last gave an update, which was I think almost exactly 2 weeks ago. So I've had a respectable amount of time to work on it, and I'll show you kind of the difference from where we left off. Let me run the project stats on this before I get carried away telling you everything about it. So I'm working on the Book Club Cardigan by Sari Nordlund. This is a worsted weight pattern that's designed to accommodate busts measuring from 29.5 to 61 inches, allowing for the recommended positive ease. This pattern costs €8.90 or about $15 Canadian, and I am not making my life easy and knitting this on a worsted weight wool as recommended. I'm knitting it out of a DK weight. I'm using the La Bien-Aimée Wensley worsted. This is a 50% Falkland Corriedale, 50% Falkland Merino, 25% Wensleydale base in the colorway Coquelicot. Gorgeous color. No one is surprised that I like this color. And despite its name, it is worsted spun. It is not a worsted weight. And as such, I am working off gauge, but when am I not? When I'm doing a Sari Nordlund pattern. So to compensate for that, I'm knitting the size 5, aiming for more like the measurements of a size 2 or a size 3. Now, I picked up this yarn in the La Bien-Aimée anniversary sale that they had last year. It was, I think, a 30% discount. It was pretty significant. So 7 skeins of this cost me $276.30 Canadian, but then I got hit with an extra charge in duty when it arrived because it was coming from France. So that was an extra $44.01. And then adding on the cost of the buttons that I picked out for this project, we're looking at a total project cost of $346 Canadian. So really giving my Lakes cardigan a run for its money, more literally than I would like for it to be. So it's now, you can see, attached. It's all in one piece. The fronts have been connected to the back. And so last time I showed this, it had not been connected. And I was basically done one of the front panels and I'd started the second panel, but I had maybe like a couple inches of it. So since then I finished that second front panel down to where it would join under the arm, joined. And then I've continued knitting the whole front and back portion from this marker. This is where I left off last time. And all of that is new. So like on the one hand, that feels like quite a bit of fabric. Like that's a decent portion of the back. And of course the back started really narrow because it started as just the neck and then you increase out. So like that's a large portion of that back knitting that's happened in the last couple of weeks. That feels like a lot of progress. Also, there's still so much sweater to go. So I have currently finished, one moment please, my ball of yarn fell down. Almost 3 balls of yarn. This is what is left of the third ball. And I have 7 of them. I am not positive that I will end up using all 7 skeins of yarn, but it is entirely possible that I will. I'm sort of operating in a no man's land here as far as how much, there's a giant hair on that, as far as how much yarn I'm actually going to need because I'm knitting this quite off gauge. So like, it's anyone's guess how much I'm gonna need. When I ordered this yarn, thought that I was getting quite a bit extra because I really didn't want to get caught short. I knew this was the case where if I ended up needing one more skein, it would end up costing so much more to get it than if I just bought that skein now, and worst case scenario, I have an extra skein that I can make something else in this color that I love. So thought I was really erring on the side of caution. Hope that continues to be true. At that time, I did not know just how off gauge I would be knitting those. So we will see. I feel like I will have enough. I don't think I'll end up super short. It just might end up closer than I thought it was going to be. And it might end up informing the length that things end up within a range that's still totally reasonable, but just not like do whatever you want because you have so much yarn, you know? And on the gauge front, so I'm knitting this on 3.5 millimeter needles, which is the recommended needle size in the pattern. But again, I'm knitting this with a DK weight yarn. Sari knit this at a worsted weight. Usually if I were knitting out of the same yarn as Sari, I would need to upsize my needles. So because I've downsized my yarn, that means that my needle size can match hers. So in terms of gauge, my stitch gauge is compensated for by upsizing to the size 5. The row gauge, not so much. So I've had to do a little bit of like free form decision making on this as I've gone along. I mentioned last time I continued the V-neck increases down more rows than you're supposed to in the pattern just because it was ending up pretty shallow on me because my row gauge is different. And so it was just ending up more like up in my neck than any normal V-neck cardigan would ever end up being. And I had to do some similar adjustments before I joined at the underarm. Though as I'm saying that, I'm realizing, no, I don't think that was actually why, because I'm pretty sure those directions were given in like inches or centimeters. It was just like knit to this length. But when I got it to that length, it just kind of seemed like a shallow armhole. And I was concerned, like I've knit sweaters before where the arms ended up being too tight, tighter than I wanted them to be. So I was like, I feel like this should be longer than that. So I just knit it longer, which also means I think before I joined it, like I thought I had finished the front panel, the first front panel enough to join. And then as I was finishing the second one and I was measuring what the depth was and like thinking about what that armhole depth would be like and would fit like, I was like, I think I'm actually going to go and knit it longer. And because you're knitting the front panels and the back panel to the same row on the chart before you join, right, because you want everything to line up, it meant that I also went back and added some more length on the back before I joined, just to get me that bit of extra armhole depth. Because even if like it fit and felt reasonably comfortable, I've also just found over time with my knits, like I don't want something that's kind of sitting in my armpit, because that just makes so much of a difference in terms of like how much it feels like it needs to be washed if it's right up in your armpit, but also felting. I found that some of my knits that fit closer under the arms have actually felted in the armpit, which then also kind of starts to like, it starts to steal your sleeve, you know, like it just starts to shift how things fit and feels like thick and crunchy under your arms, which obviously is not ideal. I've noticed that started happening with my classic rib, and I'm like, okay, guess that's a thing that I hadn't thought about, hadn't really been prepared for, but like, yeah, it makes sense. It would get warm under there, gets moist under there. This is what I get for not always wearing an undershirt under my knits, I guess. But so this was just a thing that I was thinking about with this, of like, I don't want that to be all up in my armpit. So I knit that a little bit extra long before I ended up joining. Just realized that I left this in the most awkward place to try this on, because I'm in the middle of a row, which means that it's not like open at the front to try on, but I'm also like 12 stitches into the row. Like I'm so far from being done a row, and these rows take so long. We'll get into that. I'm just gonna undo these few stitches so I can try this on, because it is not worth trying to finish this before I can keep recording. Okay, now that I've tinked that back to have it actually at the start of a row, I'll try this on to show you how far actually. I just realized this is going to be a really fun red on red outfit. One moment, please. Well, no one will ever be able to say that I did not have a color palette. So here we are with my cable on cable. There's a lot happening. I'll stand up a little bit to show you. So it currently comes down to here. This is my awkward length sunny top, you can see. So we're currently here. This is like my natural waist right here. So we're still a few inches above that. And we have so much more cardigan to knit. Like I'm on it, I'm like, okay, it's a little like shruggy vesty thing. Cool. Progress. It's a lot more like a cardigan than it was last time. But I'm like, oh man, for the amount of time that I spent on this, we are so far from done. It's feeling a little bit like very, very early in my channel when I was working on my floor length no frills cardigan, and I was like, I'm gonna be knitting this cardigan forever. That's kind of how this one feels. But I have actually been enjoying working on this one. It's now at a point where I don't have to look at the chart at all. I know exactly what's happening. And since I joined the fronts with the back, that's when it really started to feel like it was moving a lot slower, because I went from, like, I had finished the back part a while ago. I had been working on these two fronts, which are so comparatively small, right? They're like this wide. And suddenly I'm knitting two of those and the whole back panel at the same time. And it's like, wait, like a row literally takes me 20 minutes or more. Like we watched a movie the other day, and at the end of the movie, I think I had done like 4 rows, and I was like, what? So it's definitely a labor of love. It's definitely going to take a while, but we are getting somewhere. And in fact, I have reached a milestone, which is that if you can see that blue line here, stand up so you can see it better. This blue line of waste yarn is marking where the pocket's going to be. So I think what's happening, because basically here on the front, the cable chart is being interrupted to do some ribbing that is like the top of the front of the pocket. So I think what's happening later, I think what the waste yarn is doing is that I'm going to like pick up those stitches later and basically knit like a tube that then gets Kitchener stitched at the end. And that is like the pocket that sits inside. I think that's what's happening. I have not read ahead. I don't read ahead on patterns like ever. I find that the instructions usually don't really make sense to me until I've gotten to that part of the pattern anyway. So I don't really see a point. I trust the process. I trust it'll make sense. This is stabbing me through my lace shirt. But anyway, so last time that I was talking about this project, I mentioned wanting to do a mid-project block next. So I have done that. I wanted to do that before I joined the fronts with the back, because I mean, I think that's always a good idea, but specifically when there's cabling, when there's a lot of this all over texture, that can relax a lot. That could really affect the fit of things, the length of things. In this case, it didn't really affect it as much as I expected it to. I don't feel like the cables relaxed a ton, but still good information to have. And I do think that measuring after blocking armhole depth is way more informative. Actually, I'm curious if you can see a difference between the two fronts, because at the point that I blocked it, I think the second front panel was like only a little bit done. I think only one of the fronts has really been blocked. Is there a visible difference between the two fronts? Am I lying and I actually finished the front before I blocked it? Could not tell you for sure. Let me know if you see a difference. I can't remember if I mentioned what depth I actually knit the armhole to, so I ended up going with an armhole depth of just over 7 inches, where I think the pattern has you doing, so I'm knitting according to size 5 because of the gauge issue, but when it's giving things like knit until it's this many inches long, I've been looking at the instructions for like size 2 or size 3 because that's what I'm actually aiming for. But in the case of the armhole depth, I think that put it at like 5.5 inches or something, and that was what I was looking at being like, I don't think so. I don't think I'll like that. So I ended up doing just over 7 for mine. So my sleeves are also going to end up being more stitches around. I will have to see if there's a size where the instructions does correspond to that stitch count, or I might need to figure out how to fudge the chart a little bit to work with whatever number of stitches I do end up needing, or I just end up doing a lot of decreases really quickly on the sleeve. I'm not sure. We will cross that bridge when we get there, which I do hope to be soon. I actually kind of thought that by this point I would have paused working on the body to do the sleeves. I like to get the sleeves done ahead of time. I think I'm just a little bit like, the prospect of setting up these sleeves like in the round with all of the texture going on, it just feels a little bit like I just know that the initial setup of that won't be super fun, so I have just been putting that off. Also, though, it was like before I got to the point where I could have done that, like before it was all joined, I had to add in the start of my 3rd ball. And then once I had that ball going, I was like, well, I might as well finish this ball. So we'll see if when I finish the 3rd ball, I am actually diligent about sleeves and I pause the body and I stop and do my sleeves, because I do maintain it's the correct order of operations for me to follow for my own personal tastes, like getting these things out of the way, knowing that my sleeves are as long as I like them to be, not having to worry about yardage on that. I would always rather a slightly more cropped body than sleeves that are too short, so I do need to get that done. Also, I have to say, in working on this cardigan, I have gotten super comfortable with the chart. I don't need to look at it. I can look at the knitting and know what's going on and what I need to do. But does that mean that I am not prone to making errors? No. And it's not errors of like, I can't figure out what I'm supposed to be doing and I like understood it wrong. It's just errors of like, whoops, autopilot took over a little too much in that moment, was not paying enough attention, went a little bit too far with that moss stitch, whatever. So there's been a lot of, in working on this, sort of negotiating of like, what is an error that I can leave in and what is an error that I need to fix, because there have definitely been cases of both. And so each time is sort of a calculation of cost versus benefit. How annoying will it be to fix? How annoying will it be to me to look at it later if I haven't fixed it? And so, as mentioned in the last video, there are the most critical errors that remain in it are on the back and sort of like on like the top of the shoulder, like inconspicuous areas. As I've gotten onto the fronts, I'm a little bit pickier. I am fixing more things, but also there are still things that I'm leaving. So like there are a few scattered errors in the moss stitch panels that I'm like, I'm just gonna trust that no one's ever gonna see that. The benefit is that there is just so much going on in this pattern that like, I feel like it's pretty easy for one wrong stitch to be ignored. Whereas like if this were just all over stockinette, if you have like one purl stitch in the middle of that, it's very obvious. So the good news is this kind of camouflages a lot of the errors. I have been fixing errors in like once in a while. I will do the horseshoe cable on the wrong row. Like I will do it sooner than I'm supposed to, which again is just a weird autopilot thing, because like if I look at the stitches in their current state, I can immediately tell whether it needs to be cabled or if it's on the next right side row that it will be cabled. But sometimes I just get into the flow of a row and I'm like, okay, yep, at the horseshoe, get my cable needle, and it's like no actual thinking is occurring. It's just autopilot. And this is just slightly too complex of a pattern for my autopilot to actually be able to handle it successfully. So I try to be mindful as I'm working on it, but I am not just to sit there and knit with nothing else going on kind of person. I am always watching something or listening to something or talking to, like, something is always going on. So once in a while I get a little bit too sucked into whatever else is going on, and then I have to go back and I have to fix the cable. And it's annoying, but it's fine. And it's worth it. Because I know that the horseshoe cables being off would be a lot more noticeable and would bug me a lot more than an issue in the moss stitch. There is one funky horseshoe that I mentioned last time, but again, hidden, like up here. No one needs to know. But this has been informative as far as like sort of what is the upper limit of what I can work on and actually execute it successfully without requiring 100% of my brain power. Like this one is pushing the limit for sure, and that is evidenced by all the little mistakes. But all the little mistakes are just what remind us that this is handmade. And isn't that charming? There have been a few times. Oh, Copper's decided to bless us. Hi, Copper. Hi, Bucky. So yeah, basically where I currently am is that I think I have one more row of the like pocket setup to do. So one more row of the like ribbing that marks the top of the pocket. And again, I have not read ahead in the instructions, but I assume that after that I will just be resuming the chart, just following the chart as written until it gets to like the full length of the body. But like I said, I do need to pause the body and do the sleeves before I do that. So I think that means that sleeves are in my very near future. Next time I'm giving a project update, if I haven't started sleeves, please do publicly shame me, which I say only so that future me will in fact have started sleeves, because I need accountability. So here we go. Thank you so much for providing that service to me. I've been wearing this weird little shrug for a really long time now. I'm gonna put my legs cardigan back on. So despite the rows taking way longer than they used to, that definitely took some adjusting, I am really enjoying working on this. Continued from the last video, like I said, it was really a pain to kind of reacquaint myself with it. The first few hours were rough, but once I was back into it, especially now that I don't have to look at the chart at all, which also just feels very satisfying. It's like, wow, look how complicated this thing I can knit without even needing to look at the chart, because it's almost like the knit itself functions as the chart because it's so clear what everything is, and the cables are so frequent that it's very clear when it is or is not time to do that cable, because it's like a 50% difference in cable length in between cable things. It's not like, oh, am I on row 7 or 8? Is it time to cable? It's very clear. So yeah, I've really been liking that about it. It is very sort of like easy to get into a flow, especially now that the rows are long. That's the upside to the rows taking forever, is that I get to sort of lean into whatever it is that I'm doing for quite a long time and don't have to think about changing that, as long as I don't forget that it's not a row that I need to cable the horseshoes on. That is where that autopilot is most likely to get me. But yeah, I'm really enjoying working on this one. I will also, I think, enjoy a very simple stockinette pattern when I'm done this one. But for now, it's just fun to see the pattern work up. It's very satisfying. I know that it's going to be super cute when it's done. I'm a little bit dreading the button band portion, in part because I know that I made my v-neck longer than the pattern was written, and as far as like where it's telling me to put buttonholes, again, haven't looked ahead at that, but I suspect that those modifications are going to kind of mess with the directions given of how, like, where to put buttonholes. So I do suspect that's some calculating that I'm gonna have to do later that I'm gonna have a lot of fun with. Sarcasm detected, but it'll be worth it when it's done. Does this one have a double knit button band by default? I think that it does. I always want a double knit button band, so if it doesn't, I'll have to figure that out. But I think it already does. Also, the one problem with the button band that you do after is that it really makes it hard to play yarn chicken, where, like, again, hopefully that's just a non-issue. But I just have been thinking, since I'm working so off gauge, like, if that were to come up as an issue, it's no problem to finish my sleeves first. And then if I think about it in simple terms, it's like, okay, well, then you just knit the body as long as you can knit it. And that's always, like, never quite entirely true, because you do want to factor in however much ribbing you want at the bottom. Like, you kind of need to know when to start that ribbing. So you're always going to be guessing a little bit in that respect. But when you have to add a button band after also, it's like, okay, you have to factor in not only the yarn you need to transition to ribbing, but also to do your button band. And I don't know how much yarn a button band uses. Anyway, hopefully that's just a non-issue. Hopefully we have tons of yarn, tons of our pretty yarn, and fingers crossed. I have found it interesting as I've been working on this, like, when I'm actually knitting up a row, I don't really notice any variation in the yarn itself. But when I finish like sections and I look at it from a distance, I really can. So is this picking up on camera? There's sort of like lighter bits in here that you can sort of see. There's some darker sort of striping going on in here. I'm trying to find more obvious. Can you see here? There's some sort of dark stripey stuff going on. So there is variegation in this yarn. And it's been interesting to kind of see that show up as I knit because it wasn't super clear to me from the skein how much of that there was going to be. I think this is my first time knitting with yarn from a BNMA in general? No. I used it in my Serendipity sweater. I used their Inco colorway as sort of the color changing yarn, and also Winter, one of their like cream colors. And so those are not ones where I would be able to like compare something like this. Winter, because it was just such a light color, it'd be very hard to notice this kind of variation, I would think. And the other one is a color changing yarn. So this is my first time, I think, really working with one of their solids other than Winter, which is functionally white. So yeah, it's just been interesting to see how it works up and have a better idea of what their yarn looks like and how that might affect, like, in thinking about future projects, what kind of stuff would I like to do with it. Actually, you can kind of see in the skein here, see how this part, like heading down into this twist, is darker than the twist itself. Like that's not just a shadow, that is actually a difference in the tone of the yarn. But isn't this color just so good? Here, we'll just pretend it's a scarf. We're done. Ta-da. It also kind of looks like I'm doing one of those like color draping tests. Like, which season are you? I'm whatever season this is. And I bought nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which, I mean, given that I wasn't like specifically trying to shop for something, isn't that shocking? But I'm kind of surprised that nothing made me go consult that list and be like, okay, like I know that I don't really need more yarn right now, but I really like this one. I can make this with it. It'll be fine. I'll use it eventually. Nothing even really tempted me to want to do that. And I think that, like, I mean, other than the Wandering Fluff yarn, but I had no idea what I was going to make with it. So nothing else really captured me in a, like, I need to get this today sort of way. A few things entered my, like, oh, I'm going to keep this in my little, like, yarn mind palace and come back to that. So, like, I really liked the yarn from Les Garçons was there. They have some really nice, like, rich, earthy tones. They sort of a, what's it called? It's like a gold, something very, like, ochre color. Really liked that. I also really liked the feel of that yarn. It feels similar sort of to the Wensley worsted, I would say. Sort of, like, sheepy in, like, the nice way and not a super aggressive way, but not, like, a merino, you know, sort of a nice, like, earthy quality. Also quite similar to one of the reasons that I didn't buy anything. One of the things that I thought months ago I was going to buy at the show, Sonder Yarn Co. I was thinking that this was what I was going to buy at the show, and I was fully planning to do that until they had a sale on Valentine's Day, and I was like, definitely getting it while it's on sale. So it felt quite similar. I think it was actually, it might even be the same mix. This is a 75% BFL, 25% Masham, unclear. I think that the Les Garçons was the same, if not at least felt very similar. So that's one that wasn't really on my radar before that I would say is now significantly more on my radar. And really, I just had a great time looking at lots of yarn, lots of pretty things. We definitely noticed, Audrey and I were remarking on, there's a real trend of like pastel colors with neon tweed flecks in them, which we both love. We both kept gravitating toward it. But like we saw it in so many booths that after a while we were like, who is selling this neon tweed? Because they're like making a killing this year. This is Audrey's point, not mine. I shouldn't make that joke. That's hers. But it was just like a weird, like I feel like a couple years ago in Knit City, I think I saw like one dye, and I don't know who started this trend. I don't remember who it was. But I think I saw that like one time, and this time it was in so many booths. And I was like, okay, no shortage of neon tweed. Noted. Would like to make something with that at some point. Not sure what though. Like most of the colors that it comes in, like I love them as skeins, but I know that they're not colors that I like to wear. So it's one of those like, how does this actually function for me? What would I actually do with this? Unclear, but I did like looking at them. So yeah, this is the quickest Knit City Toronto haul that you will see because the haul is none. And I mean, that feels probably on par with my channel. I'm not over here with acquisitions on the regular. Like I said, I don't like having a stash. It stresses me out a little bit, actually, because to me a stash is a cue. I can only buy yarn when I know what I'm going to make out of it, because I feel very boxed in when I have yarn without a plan, because then if I come up with a plan that needs slightly more yarn, that's very annoying. That doesn't work very well. So I like to know what I want to make and then buy exactly what I need in order to make that. So it was not a big shopping day for me, but I did just, again, like thinking of it like an art gallery, it was just really fun to go look at pretty colorful yarn, creatively dyed, all the different styles of dyeing. There were some other things like accessory things. People were making like acrylic buttons that were really pretty. There was one vendor who I can't remember what it was called right now. I'll pop it up on screen, but she was making the most beautiful resin buttons. So lots of cute little additional things also were there. And yeah, it was just really fun to look around. It was also exhausting. Like I got home and was like, whoop. So I'm recording this on a Monday evening. In my head, so I went yesterday, Sunday. In my head, I was going to come home, and I got home by like 4 p.m. 3 p.m. Because yeah, I was leaving at 2, got home by 3. And in my head, I was going to take a couple hours to unwind, and then I was going to prep my recording notes for today, so they'd be ready to go as soon as I was done work. Reader, she crashed so hard. Like, I just got home and it was just power down. Power down. Watch an episode of The Pit. Watch Rachel McAdams and send help. And that was all I had in me for the day. Worked some more on my cardigan. Recording notes were not assembled, so I scrambled those together right before sitting down to record this. And yeah, I'm just like, who knew that it was so exhausting to look at that? I mean, realistically, no, it was probably more the peopling. I'm an introverted person. There's a lot of people around. It's a tiring sort of activity for me, but it was a really good time. I'm glad that I went. It was nice to be there with Audrey. And yeah, if you have been thinking about going to Knit City, Toronto, or something similar and sort of on the fence, especially if you're concerned about feeling overwhelmed, definitely recommend going this Sunday. Obviously, if you have in mind something that is like limited edition, special for the show, likely to sell out, yeah, you're gonna need to go on Saturday. But if that's not you and you're just there to browse, Sunday. Definitely go Sunday. I think the pass is also cheaper for Sunday than it is for Saturday, so recommend on all fronts. So that's it for my experience at Knit City Toronto. If you have questions about anything specific that I haven't talked about, feel free to leave them below and I'll try to answer. But yeah, that's it for Knit City. And before we get into Off the Needles, I had asked in a recent video, is there a version of me having a Patreon that would feel worthwhile? And one of the ideas that came up was actually something that I had sort of been pondering, and this really validated, was the idea of doing a book club. And I'm thinking like asynchronous, like in a group chat. I think I, in theory, like the idea of trying to do something on Zoom with everybody, but I think just the prospect of like a time that actually works for people, like I think that ends up really excluding a lot of people whose time zone or just schedule doesn't accommodate that. So I think just for the sake of it being something that is like equally accessible to anyone in the Patreon, I think that doing it in a chat is a better setup. But the idea of like, we could vote on what book we're going to read every month, and then we can chat about it in sort of like a spoiler-free sort of way throughout the month, and then have the like discussion about the book once we've all read it at the end of the month. So that's something that I'm really starting to think about setting up. Also thinking that one of the perks could be just like early access to videos, because they always go up 8:30 EST on Saturday mornings, but I always have them queued up some amount of time before then. It varies depending on the week, but it could be available whenever it is that I have it done, whether that's a day or 2 days or a week early. And I would love to know if there's any other sort of little perks that you can think of that would be like a fun bonus for you to get. I'm very open to suggestions. So that's something that I'm thinking about.
Hi, Editing Alley. I decided to just go ahead and set up the Patreon because that's kind of the only way to know for sure if there's any interest in having one. So if you go to patreon.com/AllieMakesEverything, you can see that set up. And if that seems like a good fit for you, amazing. Absolutely no pressure. If not, nothing that I have been doing that has been free is going to stop being free. That's all going to continue being the thing. It's just like an opportunity for a little bit of bonus stuff if you want to support the channel specifically, but absolutely no pressure. And if you do, thank you so much. That's incredibly kind of you.
Okay, now everything's gonna get messed up because I have to nudge the piano to plug in my laptop because liquid glass ruined everything and my battery life is now horrible. Okay, I'm back. All right, so that is all I've got on the knitting front for today, which means it's time to get into some off the needles. All right, first let's start with what I've been watching. So first up, I saw Project Hail Mary in theaters, and it's just such a good movie. I'm not a sci-fi girl. I don't care at all. But I had seen The Martian, and I actually loved it enough that I went and read The Martian, which for me to read sci-fi is like a whole other bridge. And so I had high hopes for this one, knowing that it was from the same author, knowing that it was Ryan Gosling. I was truly sitting there thinking, I cannot remember the last time I had this much fun in a movie theater. Like, I was just sitting there happy. And like, that's a long movie. And multiple times in that movie, I was just like, wow, I'm happy. And like, does the Ryan Gosling of it all hurt? No, certainly not. Ryan Gosling might be my favorite famous dude. Like, unlike almost every other celebrity man, the more I learn about him, the more I like him. That's almost never how it goes. I like him carrying his giant rescue dog up an escalator because his dog was scared. I love him being married for more than 15 years, I think, to his not only age-appropriate wife, but a wife who's actually a few years older than him. Unheard of in Hollywood. And he's just charming enough to carry a 2.5-hour movie almost alone. It was so good. It was just fun. And we went to see it so late. Like, we went to see a show that started at 10. That's my bedtime. Okay. So like, the fact that I was up so late and I was not sleepy for 1 second. I was like wide awake. I was focused. I was just thrilled. So cannot recommend that movie highly enough. The most important part of Project Hail Mary, particularly for a knitting podcast. I was sitting in that theater watching Ryan Gosling walk around in this sweater going, that cardigan is so clearly hand knit. That is not, like, wardrobe did not just go buy that off a rack somewhere. What is the deal with this sweater? Who knit this sweater? And I mean that both in the real world in terms of the production of the movie and also in terms of like in the universe of the movie, because, and this is not a spoiler, this is like where the movie starts. This is not a guy who like has someone in his life who would knit this for him. Like, kind of his whole thing is that he really kind of is on his own and has no one. So I'm like, where did you get this cardigan? Who made this for you? And the more I thought about this, because I was like, this really kind of makes no sense actually, that this guy would have this cardigan that is so clearly hand knit. And then, like, I was so fixated on this that I developed an entire like headcanon about it, which is that in the movie we learn that he, you know, a while ago was in a long-term relationship and it did not end well, obviously, because he's now alone. And my new theory is that his ex knit him this sweater and that he was the victim of the boyfriend sweater curse. And in the real world version of this, in terms of who knit it, because I was like, did someone knit this for the movie? Like, was this a hand knit that someone found secondhand? Did someone's grandma make this and they brought it onto the wardrobe set? Like, what is happening? So I tried to research this like the next day, because it was like 1 a.m. when I got home. The next day I tried to research this, couldn't find anything, but the algorithm knows that I want to know. So when, I think a couple days later, someone who worked on wardrobe for the movie started making reels about this, they found their way to me. And that is how I learned that. So I found in my own research that the sweater is sort of based on an old Mary Maxim design. And that, I guess, like, this cardigan has sort of become popular as like a retro thing. And, you know, people now spend a lot of money to get this, blah, blah, blah. But that the version that he wears in the movie is not the same. Like, it's clearly derivative of that. It's clearly referencing that. But it's not the same because his is a fox instead of a wolf. So I was like, what is going on here? And so I found these reels that explain the whole thing of like, yes, it was inspired by that. We felt like the wolves were too scary. We wanted it to be foxes instead. And that I guess they just have like staff knitters, because it said something about like, and then our knitters went to work on a super tight time frame, knitters plural. So I think like somebody knit a sleeve, somebody knit the front, somebody knit the back, and then somebody stitched it all together so that they could have this done in time for the movie. Because they were on a deadline and they wanted the sweater, including Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling wanted the sweater. It was his idea to change it to a fox. Like, I love every bit of this story. I love that I clocked it immediately watching that movie. I'm like, that is a handmade sweater. Like, you can see the like hand done inconsistencies in the fabric of that sweater. You can see the variation in the stockinette. That is not a machine knit sweater. Also, it's knit at quite like a chunky weight, and there's a lot of garter stitch, just like choices that you make when you're knitting by hand that usually are not made in commercial garments. So I was like, what is happening? So that's the story if you didn't know. Go see the movie. That sweater's now everywhere, and for good reason. It's a good sweater. We also went to see Hoppers, which is the new Pixar movie, and like here's the thing. Even a mid-Pixar movie, it's a good movie. So that's kind of how I feel about this one. Like, I feel a little bit underwhelmed, but I also like did tear up twice. Like that that is what I mean about like a Pixar movie can only be so bad, you know? This, again, sci-fi is not really my jam, so this one, sort of the emotional heart of the story is really there at the beginning and it's really there at the end, and those were the times when I was tearing up. And there's a lot of like plotty plot in the middle that I was less like emotionally invested in, but really it made me actually want to watch Ferngully, which I feel is the like spiritual predecessor to this movie, because it is very much about like environmental themes and like preservation and things like that. So I really just want to watch Ferngully now, because that was a formative movie of my childhood and I haven't watched it in a long time. So really in that way, it sort of felt like the way I feel when I watched one of the live action Disney remakes of like, that was fine, but like I would probably have been happier watching the original cartoon instead, if only they were playing that in the theater instead. Like that would be fun. Please just do that. That was kind of how I felt, but definitely worth a watch. Like if you like a Pixar movie, definitely don't skip it. It was good. It just wasn't like, you know, my new favorite movie of my soul. All right, now let's do like a joint reading and writing update, because they're sort of intertwined. So a little bit of housekeeping first. Any books that I mention are always linked in the description down below. And also don't forget about your library. Like in addition to physical books, you can also get audiobooks from your library, like through an app. It's all very simple. Get a library card if you don't have a library card. Did you know that just getting a library card is a very tangible way that you can support your local library, because their funding comes from the number of people who are signed up for library cards. Sign up for a library card. Anyway, so in talking about trying to carve out more time for my writing lately, I have been fiddling around with different versions of morning routines. I've been trying to find ways to make sure that I at least spend like a little bit of time with my writing every day so that it doesn't end up out of mind. And I just find getting things done in the morning is the most reliable way to make sure that they happen. And I think I have found the most perfect morning routine of all time. And it's a little bit dramatic and it's a little bit cliche, but it's working. We're gonna go with it. Because so what I had been doing before, like when I first had this thought a few months ago of like, okay, I would like to spend like 15 minutes in the morning just like making sure I like look at my story, remember where I'm at, and then it's in my brain so that like when I have more time, like in the evening in my spare time, I will be more likely to want to work on it. And I also find like when I kind of first sit down to my computer, like to start work in the morning, I tend to have a hard time focusing initially because I feel very sidetracked by all of the like personal admin, whatever, that comes into my inbox. Emailing back about your mortgage renewal and, oh yeah, I need to return that package. Here's the shipping label I need to print. Just like all the little minutia of life. I was thinking, okay, maybe my morning routine will be sit down and like go through my like do some personal life admin to kind of clear the slate so my brain is clear. And then once that's done, I will spend a little bit of time looking at my writing, and then I will go up to my office and I will start work. And that worked pretty well for like a week. And then I just found that the life admin part was just sort of a slippery slope, because turns out there's never really an end to the amount of life admin that one has. And I would just end up doing that the whole time and not end up doing any writing. So I was like, okay, this isn't like super working. So I decided to try modifying it a little bit, and through a series of tweaks, I have landed on what I think is now the perfect morning routine, which is, first of all, critically, no phone. What is in my inbox in the morning, first thing, it's not my business. I'm not allowed to look at that, because that's what gets me down. I need to do this and I need to do that, and that doesn't exist. Go into my window seat in my library, I have a little window seat right here. Very picturesque. This is where we get into the cliche. It's all very ideal. I'm in my library window seat, okay? I put on, are we ready for how cliche this is about to be? The Lakes by Taylor Swift, the song about being a poet who retreats to the lake. Put that on loop, repeat 1, okay? So I'm focusing, setting a vibe. And the idea of jumping straight into writing first thing in the morning, my brain's not awake. That's not happening. But what I have been doing is I have a couple of books that have become, I'm sort of thinking about them like my writer's homework. So the first one that I pick up is Shakespeare and Company, A History of the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart. This is a book that I think 3 years ago, my mom went to Paris and asked if I wanted her to bring me back anything. She who was traveling, unbeknownst to me, carry-on only. And I was like, yeah, can you bring me this giant heavy hardcover from Shakespeare and Company? Which is, if you are unaware, very famous bookstore in Paris. The most famous like English language bookstore in Paris. And it's a total icon. It's been there since the 50s. Its predecessor is from even further back. And it's just an incredible shop with an incredible history of the authors through time who have had connections to the shop, people who have gone on to be very accomplished writers. There's a lot of lore here. It's also full of pictures and memorabilia, and it's just like a gorgeously designed book. Also, like, the designer that I am is just so thrilled by this book, and it's a book that I've had for 3 years. And I've just always really struggled to actually read it because it's just not a book that I would sit down and read the way that I do other books. So when starting this morning routine, and to be clear, I am raving about this after 1 week. So there's so much time for this to fall apart, but right now I'm so jazzed about it that we're just gonna go with it. So I've just been reading like a few pages of this to start my morning. And then afterward, I follow it up with one chapter, because the chapters in this are very short, of Pity the Reader, which is a sort of assemblage of Kurt Vonnegut's advice on writing as put together by Suzanne McConnell, who was a student of his. She sort of went through like all of his writing somehow and compiled advice that he gave in the Iowa Writers Workshop, where he taught, where she was one of his students, and things he has said in interviews over time, things he has given as written advice, and he's like written some articles about writing. Also going through his fiction and like citing examples of all of the principles that she's talking about. It's really well researched, really well compiled. And this to me has, again, just been a really nice way of reading a little bit of writing craft, like kind of working on getting through something that's like teaching me and improving my craft over time in a way that feels very manageable, because it's in these very bite-sized chunks, and it's carved out a place for this type of reading that I have otherwise struggled to fit into my day. I've just really enjoyed having my like writer's homework, my like self-assigned reading, in a way that I think is really like tickling something in the brain of my former like overachieving straight A student self. And it's like, I tend to struggle with like self-imposed deadlines and things like that, but something about just this sequence of activities and the atmosphere it's just really working right now. And so I'm really trying to lean into it while I've got it. And so after I finish reading those, it's usually been like half an hour-ish, and then I have like usually half an hour to 45 minutes that I can look at my writing and work on that a little bit before I need to start my actual paid work. So that's been my new morning routine. And I'm obsessed. So I'm just hoping that I have the sort of mental fortitude to continue doing this and to not be, seduced by the phone back into the immediate inundation of everything going on in the whole world, because it's much easier to have your own thoughts and just focus on sort of like internal writing stuff when you're not thinking about all of those things yet. And having that nice little bubble has been really good. So would like to strive to preserve that. So for now, it's going really well. I'm a little bit scared I'm gonna lose it. For now, it's going really well. All right, now that is all that I've got for you today. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already, but if you already have, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time. Bye.